Hi, everybody. This video summary is for our lesson from Monday, September 25th. Let's jump down to the homework really quickly. We read and annotated an article today, and so I need you to read and annotate that before you come back to class. The article is in today's folder. You'll see that in a second. And then I want to make sure that you know that the vocabulary and key concept test will be this Wednesday. I sent out information on a parent newsletter that it was going to be on Friday, but because we don't have school Friday, I totally forgot that. So it's actually going to be Wednesday. You will need to know all of Chapter 1 vocab words and key concepts. And Chapter 2, because we're not going to be quite done with the last two key concepts, you do need to know the definition for model, and you need to know key concept number 3, but that's all. So all in all, you'll have 3 key concepts and then all of the vocab terms on your cards, okay? All right, let's come back up to the objective. It says, I will learn how scientists use models by reading a scientific article and thinking about how I'm learning by sharing my annotations with my table partner. The key here is you are going to be learning how scientists use models. And key concept number 3 says scientists can use models to test their ideas and get evidence. So this article, I'm going to have you go ahead and open that. It's called Investigating Landforms on Venus. Before we actually start to read, though, I want to mark up my copy. And I'm going to choose red right now. And I want to, a lot of times teachers will use an investigation question or a reading question. And we don't have one yet on here, but I want to write one. And since the objective for today is that I will learn how scientists use models, I think a good question would be to take that objective and turn it into a question. So I'm going to write down, and this is horrible, the stylus I'm using is not the one that we have for our iPads. I don't know where that is. So this is not a great one, but let me just have you write this. How do scientists use, you guys, models? Question mark. And every time I come across an answer to that question, I'm going to put a red star next to that. That's a good way to annotate to answer that scientific or that investigation question. How do scientists use models? Okay, so I'm going to have you guys do 2 things for me. Number 1, anytime you highlight, I want you to highlight maybe vocabulary terms. I'm going to use red to highlight my vocab terms, or not red, yellow. And I'm doing this for 2 reasons. Number 1, I want to make sure that I'm practicing my vocabulary by highlighting, but also it's very important that you see not just the word and the definition, but that you're seeing the word used in context. So when we first look at the definition or look at the title of this article, it says Investigating Landforms on Venus. I can see that I have the word landforms right here. That's one of our vocab words. A landform is a feature on the geosphere of a rocky planet. So I know I'm going to be looking at some kind of a structure or a feature on Venus. Any other vocabulary, any other important information, I'm going to use a different color to highlight. So only my vocabulary will be in yellow. And of course, you can use any color you want to, but just make that one color for vocabulary, and then everything else we're going to use a different color. All right. So we've got this title, Investigating Landforms on Venus. Here's my question. I'm actually kind of wondering why Mrs. Clayton is having me look at Venus, because we're not looking at Venus. That's not what our investigation is over. We're trying to figure out what formed the channel on Mars. So I'm wondering if I know that we're in Chapter 2, and Chapter 2's first key concept is scientists can use models to test their ideas and get evidence. I wonder if I'm reading this article, somehow it's tied to key concept number 3. So I'm going to put a question mark there. And as soon as I get evidence in this article that this article is about scientists using models, then I'm going to erase that exclamation or question mark and put an exclamation point. All right. When you're looking at an article, it's important for you to take a look at how many paragraphs we have. This is a 2-page article. We've got 1, 2, 3, and in fact, I like to number my article or my paragraph numbers, so that way when I go and look later on with some other students, I can let them know where I'm at really easily. So I'll say, okay, take a look at paragraph 2, look kind of in the middle of that, and it says, it's just a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the second page. That was paragraph number 4. This is paragraph number 5 and paragraph number 6. And then I also want to kind of take a look at the photographs. But I'm not really quite sure what the photographs are about yet. So I think it's a good idea to read the very first paragraph and kind of get a sense of the article before I look at the pictures and the captions underneath the pictures. So let's go ahead and do that. It says, imagine traveling in a spaceship towards the surface of the planet Venus. At first, everything is hidden by thick clouds. Wait a second. Thick clouds. What is that talking about? Yeah, that's talking about our atmosphere. So I'm going to highlight that in green, and I'm going to say thick clouds, and then I'm going to use a green pen. Whoops. Undo that. How do I undo? I'll do that. And I'm going to say over here in my annotations, this is the atmosphere. Okay. So it says at first everything is hidden by thick clouds, but as you get closer, you can see the rocky surface below. Okay. So the rocky surface, I know, is talking about the geosphere. So I'm going to switch and say, here's my geosphere. Now, I didn't use the yellow to highlight it because it's not the actual vocabulary word, but I'm practicing my vocabulary by saying I know what those thick clouds and this rocky surface below, they have to do with the atmosphere and the geosphere. All right, continue reading. It says, as you fly over the surface, you notice strange landforms. There's my landform vocab. Strange landforms scattered around. They are raised domes with cracks reaching outward in all directions. So this landform is described as raised domes with cracks reaching outward in all directions. I like to underline words rather than highlight sometimes because I still want to know that they're important. But sometimes if you highlight everything, then it sort of gets cluttery for me anyway, and then nothing really looks important. So I just like to underline it instead. And then I'm going to say, this is the landform that we're talking about. The last sentence says, these are called novae. And I'll underline that and say, this is also the landform. Okay? So not a lot. I didn't do a whole lot here. But it's good annotations. It gets me to think about what I'm thinking as I'm reading so I don't get lost in my thoughts or start to daydream. It really helps me focus. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the pictures now. This first one, it says, this photo taken by a spacecraft called Veneria shows the rocky surface of Venus. I'm going to go ahead and underline rocky surface. I know that's what we're talking about here. The triangles in the photos are part of the spacecraft. So as I'm looking at this, it's kind of hard for me to look past that triangular shape, but all of a sudden I do see this looks like it's kind of the shadow of the spacecraft. And within the shadow, I can see several rocks. And then looking even past those rocks, you can see like smaller rocks. So, okay, great. I really understand this is the rocky surface of Venus. Kind of cool that we can see the rocky surface of Venus. All right, this picture here. Novae are dome-shaped landforms on Venus. They are easy to see from above because they have cracks reaching out from their centers in all directions. The word novae is the plural form of the word nova. So they're dome-shaped landforms, and here's my landform again. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw like a little circle here. This is the center, and I want to make sure that I know and I can recognize I'm looking at the top view here. Now, if I were to cut this in half and be able to look at it from the side, it says it's dome-shaped. So I'm going to make a prediction and say it kind of looks like this. Here's the center, and I've got these cracks coming out from it. And that kind of helps me imagine that this is a landform. Remember, a landform is a feature on the geosphere of a rocky planet. So this really helps me understand this is like a hill, it's a dome. The last picture right here says geologist Taras Curia built a computer model. Guess what? Boom. I'm going to switch this to red, and I'm going to say computer model. And do you remember up here with my question, I said I'm going to put a star next to the things that tell me that can answer this question? So he built a computer model to do what? To test whether the high temperature of Venus's surface and the planet's thin crust make it possible for novae to form there. This is a great, I'm going to erase this star, and I'm going to actually make it go more down this way. Okay? So now all I want you to do is finish. As you see vocabulary terms, go ahead and highlight those in your yellow if you're doing the same thing as me. Anything that's interesting information that might help answer the questions about using models, how scientists use models, go ahead and highlight in red, or put at the very minimum, put a red star next to it. And then anything else that you think is interesting or that kind of reiterates some things that we've been talking about geologic processes, or about any kind of atmosphere or geosphere, or he's going to compare temperature of Earth versus Venus. Go ahead and underline those or highlight those in green, and right next to them, write a word or two just to remind you of what it is that you were thinking when you highlighted that. Okay? Have this ready for class on Tuesday. Hope to see you tomorrow.